is just preparing. Okay, Tom, you can start.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, we need to advise you that this show and tell is being recorded, and it will be available on this YouTube channel in due course alongside all of our other previous show and tells if you've missed them. So welcome to our 5th show and tell of this phase of product development for BoPS, the back office planning system. My name is Tom Buttrick, and I'm the product owner for BoPS here at Southwark Council, where we're working with partner boroughs to develop this digital tool. This morning, colleagues from the BoPS team will be presenting our latest work on the MVP for processing lawful development certificate applications, and also our wider programme of work. Next slide, please. For those who don't know, BoPS is a new software application that's designed by and for local planning authorities, and that will process planning applications in a more efficient and intuitive way, where we're looking to save time and resources for the local planning authority. Next slide, please. So whereabouts are we? We've just finished sprint 5, and we have 3 more sprints left of this phase of development. Our primary objective of this phase is still to prepare the MVP for private and public beta testing using lawful development certificate applications that have been submitted through our sister project, the Reducing Invalid Planning Application digital tool, that's also funded by MHCLG, and who Lambeth are the lead on that. We are continuing to work towards this objective alongside bringing householder planning applications back into scope. Next slide, please. So you're in a show and tell. What is it? It's an opportunity for us, the project team, to show you what we've been up to over the past 2 weeks. So what have we actually been up to? Next slide, please. But before we go on to the next, to show you what we're doing, if you do have any questions, please post them on the link here. The link is in the description of the video. So yeah, we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Martin, who's going to tell you what we've been up to. Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Morning, everyone. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide, please. So as we said at the last show and tell, the theme generally for this sprint has been preparing for full householder and starting to look at that on top of the permitted development work we're doing. I'll let the team explain in detail each of these things, but in a nutshell, we've been doing a lot of work to what we call refactor the back end of the system in preparation for that householder application work that we'll be doing. We've been making some, small tweaks, further improvements based on the feedback that we've been doing, changing text and things like that. In terms of the research and design side of things, we've been testing with planning managers, their journey through the system. We've been looking at consultation, which is an important part of householder applications, but not permitted development. And as ever, we've been aligning with our other the related project of RIPA. We're catching up regularly with them and having sessions to just make sure we're all aligned. Working towards that beta testing in the next few weeks. I think I'm going to hand over to James now, who's going to tell you a bit more about the refactoring and some of the features that have come out of that.
Hello, yes, so I'm James, tech lead on this project. So yeah, we mentioned the word refactoring. That's part of this sort of iterative development way of doing things. So we start building things early. We don't always get it right the very first time, but we're able to change things as we go. One of those things that we didn't quite get right initially was this idea, and this is sort of the object model of how we were viewing planning applications. And early on, we sort of got the idea that a planning application has to be decided on by the assessor and then decided on by the reviewer. So we built it so that each planning application had one assessor decision and one reviewer decision. It's become increasingly clear as we develop and we learn more that this isn't quite the right model. Both sort of practically, we realized that really it's not really a decision being made, it's a recommendation being made. and they can be multiple recommendations, and that can go back between the assessor and the reviewer. Also, we've learned that reviewers could sometimes be making assessments themselves. So we don't want to have this hard difference between what an assessor and what a reviewer is doing. I think we've heard other cases where people have multiple logins into systems to be able to do one thing and do another thing. We want to avoid doing that. So this is now, let me go the right thing. This is now changed to a planning application having multiple recommendations, and each one of those recommendations has an assessor and a reviewer. So what that means in practicality is that we have this is now unlocked, these new abilities that we have. So a reviewer can now make assessments, so they don't have to log in, log out of different things. A plan application can now have notes against multiple recommendations. So if it goes backwards and forwards, you'll see the history of all those recommendations that have happened. And it's just tidied up a lot of the sort of fundamental logic that's going on in the application, which makes it a lot easier for us to remove what's called technical debt. So this idea of sort of lots of code that isn't quite right, and we've been sort of building on top of, we sort of change all of that, and it's now a lot easier to move forward. A good indication of that is that at the end of this refactor, as you can see, we wrote 1,479 new lines of code, but we deleted 3,619. So overall, we have over 2,000 fewer lines of code for us to manage, which makes it a lot easier. Less lines of code equals less bugs, less things to change when we're changing other things. So I'm quite pleased with that. And then one other thing that we did this sprint was look at assignment. So it's another thing where we learned more about how assignment works. Previously, assignment, we sort of took a guess and made it so that if an assessor just viewed an application, we'd automatically assign it to them. We always knew that wasn't quite right, but we wanted to do a bit more research into why that wasn't right. And sort of an outcome of that research was learning that different local authorities do assignment very different to each other. It's all based on their internal processes. Doesn't really change how planning applications are assessed, but it's just who's doing it. So therefore, we wanted to make assignment very flexible, so that one local authority can assign it to a person rather than it being auto-assigned based on some business logic that's hard-coded into the application. And that also means that assignment isn't forbidding people from working on a case, so you can still work on the case if it's not assigned to you. However, that also doesn't imply work being done. So if you're working on a case that isn't assigned to you, it's still going to be logged as you did that work. So we're quite, I think that works. So I'm going to do a quick demo of the new system. So if we can see this, okay. This is the new, slightly tweaked application show page. So we've moved some things into the header here. So you can see the documents are here and the proposal details are here, and they'll always be there. So they're in a similar place. We've also redesigned this. So it's now a consistent page. Before it was slightly changing depending on whether you're an assessor or whether you're a viewer or what state the application is. It's now very consistent. This is always going to have these 5 steps. And what you can click, so I can't click this yet because I haven't done validate documents. What I can click will change, but the overview will always stay consistent. That also will help us with full householder applications, because obviously this list is going to get quite a bit longer. So we wanted to add a bit more consistency and design to that process. So the first thing I can do is show you the assignment. So you can see here, assigned to, it's currently unassigned. That doesn't stop me working on it if I wanted to. But if I was a manager and I wanted to assign it to someone, I know who I want to assign it to. I want to assign it. I'm currently logged in as an assessor, which is dummy name of Seymour. I can assign it to myself. I can assign it to someone else. I know who it needs to be assigned to. And that just says it's assigned to there, so we know who's meant to be looking at it. So I'm going to go through and click validate documents. As you can see, I've still got these proposal details, the documents here that I can view here. If I wanted to go more into that, I can go here and edit these documents, upload new documents, all the usual stuff. But for now, let's just say it is valid. We've already shown the invalid path in previous demos. I'll click save, and you can see that's now been marked as completed, and the next step is available for me. I'm going to assess this proposal. Let's say I've looked through it. I think everything's great. I can leave a note to my manager. As obviously I'm not a planner, so I don't know exactly what a good example of a note to my manager would be, but I'm just going to say it looks good to me. I click save. I go to submit. I can view the draft decision notice as previously. Submit to my manager. Now it's slightly different. I can see we've got this new tag of waiting. Because I'm not logged in as a reviewer, I'm not allowed to review this assessment. Yeah, and that looks good. So I will then log out of here. I'll log in as the reviewer. And what was I think it's this one. You can then see I can now review assessments. So that's the thing that I need to do. I can still view the documents, all the same thing. There's a lot more consistency in the user interface as you're going through this. I go to review assessment. I can now see when this recommendation was submitted, who it was by. So again, this is not linked to the assignment. This could have been assigned by someone else. Someone else could have come in and done a different thing, and now I'll see who it was recommended by. For this example, let's say that as a reviewer, I don't disagree with the fact that it was granted, but there's a technical detail that hasn't quite been right. So I'm going to reject this recommendation and just say some sort of technical detail is not right. I can save that. And now I'm going to go with the slightly rare example of, let's say that Seymour is off unwell. I can't log in. Because we're not restricting it to who's assigned or saying that reviewers can't do certain things. There won't be a scramble to find the username and password for Seymour so that we can unlock it, etc. I, as the reviewer, could just go in, do another assessment. Again, anyone could do this. I can now see that recommendation was made and it was challenged at these dates and times and who it was challenged by. So let's say I want to see that, and it's still recommended. And I'll leave another comment here saying fix those technical details, go back round, submit it to my manager, who happens to be me. And I review the assessment, and you can now see we're getting a longer list of what's changed as it goes through. So this time I'm going to say, yes, I do agree with the recommendation. Don't need to leave a comment this time. It's not mandatory because obviously I'm just agreeing with it. There's nothing more to say. Click save there. Publish the determination. And we're done. It's now been granted, and the decision notice will be sent to applicant, all the stuff that we've seen in previous demos. I think that is it. I'm now going to pass back to Martin.
Yeah, thanks, James. That looks great. Thank you. Yeah, we've been doing a little work on the kind of how. For those that don't know, BoPS is a fairly it's very much focused on processing the applications. It's got no interface, no public interface for applications being received. Hence, our working closely with the RIPA project, who will be providing the public-facing interface as a kind of helper for people preparing their applications. As a consequence, the API that we have, that's our application programming interface, the thing that allows us to receive applications, was quite customized to the work that RIPA are doing. But we've been working with them to simplify the structure, how we receive the proposal details, so that it's a bit more generic and it will be a bit easier, A, for them, but also for for us to integrate with other systems, other suppliers of these kind of application processing systems. So we'll be we've kind of agreed the new design for the API, the structure of the data, and we'll be implementing that next sprint. Again, for people who aren't aware, a little while ago, Hackney Council created a new form, a new application system for householder planning applications, which we looked at during alpha, and we did some prototyping with that to receive applications, our alpha phase being our kind of prototyping phase. And we're going to look at that again. We've been looking at that again to see if, because it's an open source project, we can just pick up the source code and work with it. And that will be a really good way for us to test an end-to-end householder application process, which is exciting. And again, previously in the project, we've been engaged with Planning Portal, and they are now well underway with a kind of major rebuild of their system. So we've had a meeting with them this week to just re-engage, to show them our API, in the hope that at some point in the coming months, they will be able to send planning applications directly to BoPS as well. That's quite encouraging. I think I'm going to hand over to Ali now, who will tell you a little bit more about the design and research work we've been doing this sprint.
Great, thank you. So this sprint, we've been testing the manager section of the BoPS system. So that's how applications are received. So a planning officer will make a recommendation, and then it'll come through to the manager. So we were testing how the manager kind of checks the application and then determines it. So we were testing with 2 different local authorities, which were actually outside of our partner council. So with Camden and then Cambridge. It was really great to see kind of the commonalities within the system, but then also how individual councils have like approached that process slightly differently. So we've started to synthesize that those findings from the testing, and we're looking at how we can iterate some of the features within the MVP, and then also kind of create some maybe different functionality that we'll put in the backlog for later down the line. Next slide, please. We've also, as it's been mentioned previously, we've started to pick up full householder. So kind of like looking at what has been done previously and also identifying some of the gaps. So one of the big gaps in our prototype was consultation. So we started planning for some discovery research to understand that process. So we had one of those sessions yesterday, and then we got 2 more booked in for the coming sprint. So I'm really excited to see how that is implemented into the BoPS system. So it'd be great. We're also looking to kind of like keep testing the full householder section. So if anybody does want to get involved and test that, please do get in touch. It's always great to get more voices and opinions on that process. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to pass back over to Martin.
Thanks, Ali. Yes, thanks, James. If you go to the next slide. I'll run through this in a bit of detail. So the general theme is enhancing permitted development, which we'll continue to do. We have plenty of features to implement, which I'll run through, but also continue to explore those household applications. Just a reminder to everybody that there's a link here. And we must create a short link for this actually, because I can imagine people trying to copy this down right now. But this is to our backlog, a Trello board of all the tasks that we have lined up and the priority tasks, and you can see what's going through each sprint. And I'd encourage people to take a look at that, and please ask us any questions that you may have around that. So what we, as usual, our planning session is this afternoon, so that we can take in any feedback from the show and tell today into that planning session. But overall, this is generally what's in the backlog, which we expect to be looking at in the next 2 weeks. We have to implement those changes to the API that I discussed, simplifying the process of receiving proposal information. We've designed and tested to a certain extent an activity log, which is a kind of audit trail of all the activities that happen within the BoPS system, and a really neat way of showing that as a record of what's happened. We've at the moment, we have the ability, when a planning officer makes a recommendation, if they're refusing the recommendation, they can add details to the decision notice to say why they're refusing it. But at the moment, they can't add details to say why it's being granted, which has been requested by some planning officers and is obviously a necessary feature. So we'll be adding that. We're receiving UPRNs, these unique property reference numbers, from RIPA as part of the application process. And we'd like to look at how we can make more use of those to make them more useful for planning officers, perhaps by linking into GIS systems or other systems. And another feature is we have a fairly crude mechanism at the moment for determining whether documents submitted as evidence are made public or not. So there's two aspects of that. One is whether they're displayed on the decision notice, and the other is whether the whether that document can be viewed via our API, i.e. made publicly available. We want to enhance that a bit and add a bit more control around it so that people can be very specific. That also leads to some work we're doing looking at how we publish the planning applications to the planning register. So we're talking to not directly to iDocs, but we're looking at iDocs as an example of a provider of a register and how we might integrate into iDocs just to get the information from BoPS out publicly into a public register, or indeed how we might pull information from iDocs. Ali's already talked about this key feature of householder applications, the consultation process. We're going to continue to gather more insight around that process and also synthesize them and try and come up with some ideas as to how we might deliver a really simple but useful version of consultation for our system. And finally, we are obviously preparing for a beta test where live data will go through the system. So we're getting in some legal agreements in place, things like the data protection agreement and impact assessments and other stuff like that in the background. There's quite a lot there. I imagine in 2 weeks' time, we'll show you some of that, perhaps not all of it, but that's an idea of what's in our backlog and what we plan to do next. I'll hand over to Tom, who'll wrap things up, I think.
Thank you, Martin. So if you'd like to get involved with the project, we're super keen to hear from you. If you'd like us to come to your team to demo the product. I see in these show and tells, you kind of see these incremental improvements, but obviously showing the product in the whole is a really good user experience, and we welcome the opportunity to show you. If you'd like to get involved in testing, to test the tool, to give us your expertise and insight into how we can improve the tool, do get in touch as well. Sort of our my email address is there, but also our Twitter feed. But yeah, get in touch, and we're super keen to get speaking to new councils. So yeah, please do. We're going to now move on to some questions. If we could jump onto the next slide, please. There's a link there. The link's also in the YouTube description. Do drop any questions in there now. I think there's at least a couple in there already. So if I could hand over to Lauren, who can read the questions out and we'll respond.
Thank you, Tom. So we have a few questions. So the first one is, what's the plan for householder applications? How will you action consultation?
Good question. As we've touched on, Martin, I'll start if you like, and then I can hand over to you. In terms of householder applications, yep, we did a lot of work last year around householder applications, and we are now revisiting that previous work because we previously decided to focus on lawful development certificates for this most recent phase. So that's coming back into scope now with the review of the work we've done. But we recognise actually public consultation is one of the areas that we need to do further work in. So as we move into the next phase of development, we'll be picking that up, and we welcome the opportunity to sit down with partners and authorities to work out how we do that. We're as Ali said, we're conducting some research on consultation, and we'll be able to feed back on that in due course. Martin, anything to add to that?
I do, but I think maybe Ali's got a bit. Ali, are you jumping at the bit to say something there? It looks like you are.
Okay, sorry, Ali.
That's okay. I was just going to say it is a process of discovery. So at the moment we don't know what we don't know, but it was had a first session yesterday, and it does look like there's kind of two processes to this system. So first identifying who you need to contact, and then how we're going to be pulling the responses back into the system. So it's kind of understanding what is happening currently, and then also how we can improve and iterate on that system to make it more efficient and user friendly. So we started the research, but we'll be working on that in the coming sprint.
Thanks, Ali. There's actually a further question. It's actually the third question. Maybe we just jump onto that because it relates to householder and consultation again. Lauren, would you mind reading out the question at 10:44?
Yes, of course. And so it says, when you get to householder, is there a plan for consultees to be able to view documents and add comments directly into the system rather than via email, etc.?
I pick this one up.
I can jump. I was going to say yes. I think that is part of making the system more efficient. So that's something that we heard yesterday about how if you've got, maybe not for full householder, but if you're getting 200 responses, that's a lot of emails coming through. So we definitely want to improve on that system and have the information going directly into BoPS.
Yeah, I would add to that as well. In our earlier phases of the project, we did quite a lot of thinking about what would add the most value in terms of consultation, and having that mechanism to collate the feedback from the public and display it in the context of the application. So if you imagine one of those, I don't know if we have it in the prototypes or in the design at the moment, but one of those accordion controls, which was consultation and could show feedback coming in from the consultation process, that tested very well during alpha. Also, I mean, that's immediate value that we could add, and we did quite a lot of work on, we did a bit of work looking at what a better planning register might look like. And that included a much better way for inviting feedback from the public. But we kind of parked the stuff on the public register and decided to focus on making our data publicly available via the API. So that will be the kind of, that will be the public facing. There'll be an entry for every application that people can go and visit, and that would be the natural place for them to just post feedback. So yeah, definitely we'll be looking at that, a really big opportunity for us to improve the process.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks.
Lauren, do you want to jump on to the next question?
Yes. So the next question is, what was behind the decision to create a linear workflow and prevent assessment at the same time as validation, for example? Doesn't that prevent efficiency?
So I think, I mean, just unpicking this question, there's a couple of points, isn't it? There's a couple of actions in terms of the validation and then assessment. Now, with the way we're working with Ripper at the moment is that data that the application goes through Ripper, and the idea of that is to minimize an invalid application, and that data then comes through to us. But then we recognize that there needs to be a second check, really, just to confirm that the application is valid. And I guess at that stage, the case officer is looking at the application. They may want to do an assessment there and then. There's nothing stopping them. However, as we move on to the assessment screen, we still need to record that process that they've gone through to actually reach their recommendation. So I don't think there's anything stopping them per se, but it is what we're trying to do is create a more streamlined process, but to enable that. But there's nothing stopping them doing that early assessment of the scheme. Martin, did you have a comment on that?
No, just you said what I was going to say. Essentially, we're not preventing people working on it. They can view all the information to make the assessment. Yep. What they can't do is make a recommendation. So they can't make a recommendation until the documents have been marked as valid.
Thanks. Lauren, I think we have one more question.
Yes, so the final question is the work on planning register based on IDOCs or Tascomi brackets idocs.
I mean, Martin, you may want to come in there, but my understanding is that our work on the planning register is by ourselves. Obviously, we have an interim position that we are exploring around for beta testing, getting data to the existing planning registers. But in terms of where we go with planning registers, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I was going to agree. It's a pragmatic decision to look at iDocs first for us, because all our partner councils use iDocs. I think that's right, isn't it, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, other suppliers, although Tascomi is also owned by iDocs. So yeah, we're starting there because we have a member of the team at Southwark who's really close to iDocs and understands the mechanics of it, and he's supporting us to look at that for a start. But it won't be exclusive. As I say, the primary goal, one of the primary goals for this project was to make data available, open data. So we've focused on that API and making sure that the information is available in an accessible and generic way, and it should be able to feed in longer term to any system that can support it. But as we know, integration with existing systems is challenging, and you can't fix everything all at once. So that's our approach, is to kind of tackle iDocs first and then look at other systems as well, whilst making sure it is an open system.
Great. Lauren, are there any further questions?
I'm just checking, and no, the only final one was a comment, a positive comment that said, "Looks really good, great work, and really coming on a pace." That's
great. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of the show and tell. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your time. We hope you enjoyed seeing what we've been up to. The next show and tell will be Thursday, 10:30 on the 4th